The Roman Colosseum was declared open by Emperor Titus in 80 AD, and kicked off what may have been the craziest 100 days in history. Titus was not running well lately, and had already dealt with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which had destroyed Pompeii, but gave us a pretty cool Bastille song. There had also been an outbreak of the plague and a major fire during his reign. Titus decided that what the people needed, instead of a fire department or public sanitation, was 100 straight days of non-stop action at the brand new amphitheater. The citizens all said, "He really gets us." He came out of the gate strong, flooding the arena and bringing in horses and bulls who had been specifically trained to swim. Bull swim coach. I think we have another entrant on our worst jobs list. He then upped the stakes by doing a recreation of the famous sea battle between the Corcyraean Greeks and the Corinthians. The ships rammed and smashed each other into oblivion, killing hundreds of slaves and prisoners in the process, but completely delighting the 75,000 Roman citizens in attendance, because, the Romans were classy like that. After that, it was 3 straight months of non-stop action, with animals in the morning, gladiator fights in the afternoon, and executions at lunchtime. Condemned prisoners and deserters were either crucified — Romans were big fans of crucifixion, as you may have already read somewhere else — or they were tied to a stake and attacked by animals. Of course they were tied up, otherwise they might have started punching that 1,200-pound bear and totally won the fight. The Romans were also the first people to learn that all the good stuff always happens when you're at the concession stand. What did I miss? Oh, not much. That bear just ripped apart Barnabas and swung his entrails around like a lasso. Oh man, I can't believe I missed it. Anyway, here's your boar burger. Sorry, I don't really know what they ate back then. Following the executions, the crowd was entertained by jugglers and acrobats. I mean, talk about your bad gigs. I'm guessing it's hard to concentrate on juggling when a pack of lions is still munching on a dude 10 feet away. The Romans loved and cherished animals. And by loved, I mean loved to kill them. And by cherished, I mean they cherished the way that animals were able to rip condemned prisoners and slaves to shreds for their amusement. In the first 100 days alone, over 9,000 animals were slaughtered. There's no estimate of how many people were executed over the same time, because ain't nobody got the time to be keeping track of all that. After all, it's not like they're animals. We don't care. One big problem was how to find new and interesting animals and transport them to Rome. At that time, the only animals that most Roman citizens were familiar with were cats, dogs, chickens, pigeons, and rats. And they knew that nobody would fight a 2-hour chariot traffic jam to get to the Colosseum, pay for parking, and get gouged at the concession stand, only to watch a dog battle a chicken. Luckily, the Roman Empire covered 2.3 million square miles, and stretched from North Africa and the Middle East all the way over to Great Britain. You need deer? I got a guy in Britain. Bears and wolves? Talk to my man Jacques in France. Or if you want to really crank it up a notch, then North Africa was definitely your jam. That's where you would find lions, tigers, and panthers. The public was also big fans of rhinos, hippos, elephants, crocodiles, and gorillas. The most popular animal fights, or venationes, if you're using this video to study for your Latin final, pitted one animal against another. By the way, if you're using this video to study for your Latin final, please stop. Best case scenario, you're looking at a high D. And fairly quickly, the organizers learned that these fights needed to be fairly evenly matched by size and ferocity. People got a lot more excited about a rhino versus an elephant than a lion versus a deer. And speaking of rhino and elephant action, one particularly bloody battle between two such animals took place when an elephant, who'd just taken about all the crap he was going to take from Mr. Rhino, picked up a broken spear with his trunk and gouged out the rhino's eyes. Witnesses said that the elephant became enraged when the rhino had earlier grabbed a metal chair from under the ring and hit the elephant when his back was turned. Another popular venatio featured one or more animals going up against a bestiarius. There were 2 types of bestiari, the willing participants and the, much less willing. The willing ones were people, usually slaves, who had been specifically trained to fight wild animals. I'm guessing they started off battling turtles or cats, and gradually worked their way up the food chain. Even by gladiator standards, these guys usually had very short careers. But one exception was the legendary Carpophorus. He routinely dispatched lions, bears, and leopards. He single-handedly killed every animal on Old MacDonald's farm, and your son's fiancé. His personal best in one match was 20 different animals. Although, since they came at him one at a time like the villains in a Bond movie, it wasn't as hard as you'd imagine. The second type of bestiaris was the condemned prisoners. They were either tied to a stake, or, if the emperor was feeling extra generous, they'd be given some small weapon like a stick or a Swiss Army knife before the bear or lion was released into the arena. And what happened if the prisoner was lucky enough to somehow take down one of the beasts? Did you guess that they were given their freedom and sent on their way? Really? Have you ever seen one of our videos before? Surprise, they just sent in an even bigger animal to finish off the job. The Colosseum beasts were like the Canadian Mounties. They always got their man. But as much as the crowd enjoyed a lion taking on a naked slave who was armed with a sandal, what they really came for were the gladiator battles. Although there were over 50 different types of gladiators and a school for each, the battles generally tried to match combatants with similar styles and experience. The one exception would be two andabatas going at it. Andabatas were gladiators who fought blindfolded. The one time they tried a match like that, the two men wandered around the arena for over an hour without making any contact. Not even the crowd yelling colder and warmer could break the impasse. But some of the most epic battles were when a Retiarius, who was armed with a net and a trident, was pitted against a Murmillo, who had a helmet along with an arm cover and a short sword. Contrary to almost every gladiator movie ever made, these fights were very seldom fought to the death. And if you're thinking it's because the Emperor got all soft and showed them compassion and mercy, you'd be wrong. It's because gladiators were expensive. They were expensive to train, expensive to house, and expensive to feed. Many gladiators had years of training under their belts, and they didn't want to see their investments go up in smoke because some lucky bastard managed to stick your guy with a giant shrimp fork. That's not to say gladiators didn't have any incentive to do well, especially if they happened to be a slave or someone who was invaded by Rome and forced to attend gladiator school. If he spent at least 3 years in combat and pleased the emperor with his cunning and bravery, he could be awarded the Rudis, a wooden sword that symbolized the end of life as a gladiator and starting a new one as a free man. This was the ultimate goal for almost every gladiator, who was thrilled with the opportunity to live a longer and much less fighty life. You might have noticed, though, that I said almost every gladiator. There's always that one guy who can't take a hint and doesn't know when to go home. In ancient Rome, that guy was named Flamma. Flamma was a slave from Syria who was, by all accounts, something of a major badass. He was taken as a slave and later made to attend gladiator school, where he was known for his brute strength and cat-like reflexes. But Flamma was different from almost every other gladiator because he liked being a gladiator. I mean, he really liked being a gladiator. The first clue is the fact that he fought 34 battles in his time as a combatant. If that doesn't sound like a lot, consider that most gladiators fought 10 times or less before calling it a career. Some won their freedom, being bestowed the Rudis after a great career or a particularly entertaining battle, and immediately beat the hell out of Rome to start their new life as a shepherd or web designer. Of course, the vast majority of ex-gladiators only knew how to do one thing: be a gladiator. So many of them went to teach at one of the hundreds of gladiator schools scattered throughout the empire. Each trainer, called doctores back then, specialized in one particular style. And that makes sense, because you definitely wouldn't want to send a sword and shield trainee to the trident and net dude. But that wasn't the life for Flamma. He had no interest in retirement at all. Most gladiators would kill for the chance to receive their freedom. I mean, of course, they would kill. That was pretty much their whole job. But Flamma was offered his freedom on 4 separate occasions and turned it down each time. Why? And it's not like Flamma was some Superman who never lost a fight. I mean, he was good, but he wasn't like unbeatable. Out of his 34 battles, he won 21, lost 9, and was granted a reprieve 4 times. If this was the UFC, no way are you getting a shot at the title with that record. Of course, Flamma died exactly the way you would think. He was run over by an ox cart as he was leaving his favorite bakery. I'm kidding. He was killed in battle at the positively ancient age of 30. It's like that old saying, it's not the first 8 losses that get you, but watch out for the 9th one. Domitian, who was known to be one of Rome's most ruthless emperors, was known for many things. His sadism, his ruthlessness, and the major improvements he made to the Colosseum during his reign. Among those improvements were an expanded holding area for animals and slaves, more seating, and a self-checkout lane at the concession stand. But what Domitian was not known for was his sense of humor. I mean, it's not like he never laughed. One time a condemned prisoner was being drawn and quartered in the arena. If you've been lucky enough up until now to not know what being drawn and quartered is, congratulations. And sorry, because I'm about to tell you. It's when you take 4 horses with a rope tied to each one, you tie the other end to each of the 4 limbs of the poor bastard who's almost always starting to get a bad feeling about this whole deal right about now. You then slap each horse on the butt so they take off running, and hilarity ensues. So the unfortunate guy had 3 of his limbs ripped clean off, but his right arm and torso were still attached to the galloping horse. He scampered around the arena, and every time he made a turn, the torso would go flying into the stands. If you've ever been tubed behind your dad's boat when he's already got a case of natty ice under his belt and it's only 11 a.m., you know exactly what I'm talking about. Of course, Domitian thought that this was the funniest thing he'd ever seen, and reportedly couldn't stop laughing for the rest of the show. So I think we have established this was not a dude he wanted to get on the wrong side of. But that's exactly what happened to some random dude who was in the crowd one day. His name has been lost to history. so we'll just call him Hecklus Maximus. Anyway, old Heck loved nothing better than to get a snoot full of mead and jeer and heckle the gladiators. So one day, Hecklus is doing his thing and totally ripping this gladiator a new one. But what Heck didn't know, or was too hammered to care, is that the gladiator he's heckling is Domitian's favorite gladiator. Who was your favorite gladiator? Mine was Nitro. Anyway, Domitian hears this and is not happy about it. Like, at all. Like, at all. But kicking him out for the day or calling the Roman guards to take him to jail isn't really Domitian's style. He's a little more, let's call it proactive. He orders Hecklus apprehended, march to the center of the arena, and strip naked. Just when Heck thinks that that's about the worst thing that could happen, he's tied to a post. He tries to apologize to the Emperor, but it's too late. They let loose a pack of wild dogs who rip apart poor Heck in front of the entire crowd. Reports vary on what happened next exactly, but one thing's for certain. Absolutely nobody was heckling. Despite being known for his sadism and cruelty, Domitian was always looking for new ways to make the shows at the Colosseum more and more spectacular. The crowds thought that they'd seen it all, but Domitian was about to blow their minds. Speaking of not so great guys, Commodus was a real piece of work. Commodus, who you might remember from the movie Gladiator, and who also apparently bore a strong resemblance to Napoleon and Johnny Cash, ruled Rome for 31 years after the death of his father, Marcus Aurelius. He pretty much sucked as emperor, mainly because what he really wanted was to be a gladiator. In fact, Commodus took part in hundreds of gladiator battles, and amazingly was undefeated. Wait, that would make him the greatest gladiator of all time, right? Not exactly. Because he was emperor, every single opponent would end up submitting to him. After all, did you really want to be the one who pissed off the guy who believed he was Hercules and renamed Rome after himself? Didn't think so. And here's the kicker. Every time he fought, he'd charge the city of Rome 1,000,000 sesterces. That would be like 48 million in today's sesterces. Not surprisingly, this put a serious strain on the Roman economy, and he was equally hated by the common citizens and the ruling class. Say what you want, the guy brought people together. And speaking of hating Commodus, the people really hated the whole Gladiator Act for another reason. They wondered why, if the emperor was so tough, is he wasting his talents fighting in the arena when he could be out there leading the troops in battle against barbarians and other opponents of Rome? Fair point, and I definitely think you should ask him at the next meeting. One final note about Commodus. If you've seen Gladiator, you might believe Commodus was killed after an epic battle to the death against Russell Crowe. That's not exactly how it went down. In reality, he was strangled to death in his bathtub by a professional wrestler who was fed up with seeing Commodus parading around dressed as a gladiator. Man, if you can't trust movies and videos to get history right, who can you trust? Speaking of pressing the subscribe button, press the subscribe button. Well, that's it. If you made it to the end, subscribe and click this video here for more.